RSA again, I'm welcoming you to my quilting nightmare or dream, whatever you want to call it. It depends on the day. I just wanted to walk you through the basics of my operation. I do not have a finished quilt yet, so we will see how that goes, and I'll let you know as many lessons learned as possible. I'd like to show you some of how I have my setup going. I showed you in a previous video how I based most of my hexagons. I told you I buy my hexagon papers. Some other things that I use is the hand quilting thread. I have a couple different varieties I've gotten from different places, and I started this process off using cheap thread, and I found along the way it tangled constantly, and the extra $1 for the nice thread was really worth it. Even though it is basting and you're going to tear it out later, if you spend half of your time that you're doing a hexagon untying the thread and getting knots out of it, then you're wasting more time than it's worth. I got these extra long basting needles, and as I mentioned in my other video, I've kind of developed a curve in my needle. It's kind of hard to see here. Still a little hard to see. It sort of fits on my hand because I just kind of hold it and kind of punch in the middle a little bit, and it ends up with a flex to it. I don't know if that's just because I am peculiar. It's entirely possible. And my little straight pin has a bit of a curve to it. No longer straight. My basic operation is I'm setting up clusters for the flower garden with a center petal and 6 on, or center of the flower and 6 on the outside. I'll show you more of those in a moment, but right here I have sets of rough cut fabric that are ready to have the papers applied to them, which I showed you in the other video, which I subsequently took apart to take this video. Some of the things that I have in my portable kit is this little thread cutter slash needle threader. I don't use the little needle threader part that much because these basting needles have a very nice, easy to aim towards hole, but the little miniature thread cutter is kind of useful. With these sets, one thing I will say is I usually based off 8 of a pattern. 6 for the petal and 2 for centers somewhere else in the quilt. So they kind of coordinate together. One thing I will recommend, and I'll show you how it backfired on me, is you need a huge variety of colors or you'll end up with a bunch of flowers that have similar materials, and then you'll have to go buy another set and they'll have similar materials, and you won't have quite the tie of colors throughout the whole quilt. These are things that I've learned along the way, lessons learned. Hopefully you can profit from that. This is my, I would call it the petals tub. I have sets that are already done that I haven't really counted off. They're more than the 1 flower's worth. These are piles that are ready to be basted. There's a set of 8 pieces of fabric per each one of those. 6 for petals, 2 for extras. This is random fabric that are rough cut. As you'll notice, there's a little bit of a variety in size. I told you earlier, 5x5 to 6x6 are probably the easiest to do, but you can, in a pinch, do one as small as a CD. It is much more of a fiddly bit problem because it barely fits, and you end up spending a lot of time trying to convince it to work. If you iron it, it helps, but, you know, ironing while you're basting on the couch is not really advisable. I'm going to switch on to the next view of stuff. Let's see here. This was going to tell you about how the direction of the fabric makes a difference when you are putting the fabric, or putting the square onto the fabric, excuse me. You try and line it up where the pull in the fabric versus the non-pull. If you line it up the same way every time, you end up with your hexagons and the pattern on the fabric lining up to where you end up with a different design than you might have thought. Because all of these individually are just stripes, but when you put them together it makes this really interesting diagonal thing going on. Back to the size of the original piece of fabric that you put a hexagon on. This one is an example of one that was cut the CD size. It's much smaller pieces. You actually end up using a lot more thread because you're going a farther distance going on the outside of the hexagon. This is, I believe, a 5-inch square. I bought as a charm pack online, and it works pretty good. You've got some skinnier corners, but most of them are okay. But the 6-inch almost is too much. It can get a little bit lumpy in the middle, but you use a lot less thread, and I like it because it's easy. You don't have to think, and you honestly don't have to look very much while you're doing it. Speaking of portability, I have this in my purse, which is a small little makeup bag I got at thrift store. It has a small spool of thread, not pool. Looks like it's a Coats hand quilting blend of some sort. This doesn't particularly matter what color or anything because, you know, it's just basting. This is the pile I'm using that I'm trying to get out with one hand. It's not going very well. This is what I have as my little portable kit for when I'm trying to sew the hexagons together. I have a little thread conditioner. Haven't tried it yet. New acquisition. I have this little thing that I have an extra piece of thread on, or an extra pile of thread on, in case I don't take this spool with me somewhere. I could take just this, which has the thread cutter tucked in there. It's a random piece of cardboard, and the needle tucked in the other side, so I could take that somewhere if I needed to. This is a random piece of foam from like a kid's game that works pretty good for a place to park the needle that isn't within your flesh. This is a set I did when I was at the Social Security office the other day, changing my name. And, sorry for the fuzziness, don't have a tripod. I basted all of them together on the back, or I sewed, I should say. I sewed them all together. I've got one of the side seams done, and I did this with one continuous thread from here all the way around the center piece and out that one corner with one piece of thread. So I did some minor knotting at the corners, but I didn't have to cut and knot and cut and knot and cut and knot. With a little planning, if you can get this direction going and line it up. And this is going to be a flower. It's pretty. It needs to be finished up. Here's another example of how you can, when you line up your fabric on your hexagon, you can get a similar pattern on each one. So these will all make a nifty little design when they're put together, which would work better if I wasn't trying to do this while I am on the camera. But anyway, this is one that I am currently working on sewing the petals to the center. I'm not going to take it apart because I am only working with one hand right now, and that probably would be a mess. Here's the third layer. Which is, as I knock something down, some of the completed flowers I have. To go back to the problem of not having enough variety of fabric when you first start out, you'll notice some similarities. I've got the buttons here, I've got the buttons there, which is nice, but then I've got the grass here and the grass here, which is nice. That's the kind of continuity you want. But what I ended up with was not having a big enough variety. So then I have the grass and the paisley, and then a different grass and the paisley. They're a little too close to each other, for my opinion these days. This one Has a dot center. It's kind of like a winter scene, but it's got dot center. That's got a dot center. This one ended up with a dot center. I mean, the colors coordinate, but I've got 3 of them with a dot center right now. So I'm going to have to spread them out across the quilt, or it's going to look a little repetitive. And then I have the peacocks with the grass. And here's the peacocks. And here's some grass. And here's some grass. And there's some grass. So they're a little too close. There's not quite enough variety in this first batch. Then I went and I gathered some more thread or more fabric. So now I have much more of a variety, and I can pull different combinations. And by making 8, you have petals and 2 centers for other coordinating flowers for you to work on your variety. That is about all I had to share at the moment. Good luck. This is a process. I don't really know what I'm doing, but at least I've made some mistakes, and you can possibly learn from them. And hopefully we'll end up with a gorgeous quilt. Thanks.